Hi. Today I want to talk about the process of programming a brain. And this is just going to be an overview because there's many ways to program. I believe that the spirit of Leviathan is directly involved in programming. Programming at its base level, it's just a mixture of sorcery and words and trauma. And you'll find Leviathan has a really active role in that because he twists words. He brings confusion. He brings pride. He loves to prey on abandoned, rejected, isolated people. And the traumatized child is just an easy target for that. The programming is designed to change the way the person thinks in their emotional center. The right brain is where we carry our deep emotions like that. We can sometimes think of our emotional center as our heart, but it's actually within our brain. Proverbs 23:7 says, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. So the heart, or the emotional place in us, has the ability to think. Proverbs 4:23 says, keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. And trauma really keeps us from being able to keep our heart with all diligence because they're working on your brain being shut down partially so that the trauma can take root. That verse can be explained as whatever is allowed into your heart or into your emotional being will be expressed in the actions in your life, both positively or negatively. And stress has a way of showing us what we're believing in our emotional center that we aren't really acknowledging with our logical thoughts. There can be a disconnect between our emotional center and our logic center, between our heart and our head, and our feelings and our thoughts. The programming puts the disconnect there purposefully. So the left brain is where we have logical, analytical, factual, sequential, verbal, linear thoughts. And then the right brain is where we're creative and we're intuitive, we're artistic, we're nonverbal, emotional, we're imaginative. And so trauma, if it's severe enough, will disconnect those from being able to work at the same time. Okay, so this is a picture of a brain, and this right here is the corpus callosum. This is the divider between the right and the left brain, and it's the barrier between the two sides. So when we're young, this barrier is really strong and solid. It's like cartilage. And as we age, the barrier weakens and it will develop holes, and as it dissolves, the emotions and behaviors can leak through. Age 30 and beyond is when that typically will start deteriorating. Now, that doesn't mean that somebody who's younger than that isn't experiencing the leak through, because these are just generalities. So a lot of emotions and midlife crisis events and things like that can be related to changes in the brain of the emotional trauma leaking through. Doesn't mean that all people that have midlife crises are trauma survivors. Just means it can be. So young people may not have a conscious connection to the trauma-based mind control because their barrier is still intact here. In the programming, in order to get a programming deep into the brain, deep down in here, the use of trauma on purpose will shut down the left brain. So this front brain is also the left brain, and this interior brain, this deep inside, is also the right brain. So the use of trauma will shut this down so that excuse me, so that information's going right to here. So when someone's in shock, they can look awake, but they're not really present, when they're in shock. But when someone's life has been threatened, like in a car accident or a near drowning experience, like especially in cold water, the brain can shut down all the reactions except that to keep the body alive. So the brain is going to prioritize the life of the person over the cognition and the awareness of what's going on. If the trauma is deep enough, the person will revert to a fetal position, and programming is put in really quickly when there's that much shutdown of the right brain. The programming can go deep inside. It can be simple, like statements that are spoken when the brain is in that trauma state. There's really no filter of logic that's available, because here is where the logic is in the brain. And if that part of the brain is shut down, there's no filter to say, oh, these words aren't true, or this isn't a reality. It's just going to go in. So they can use words when you're in that trauma state, like you're stupid or you're ugly, no one likes you, God isn't real, those kind of things. And it goes deep into the brain without the filter being able to stop it from going there. And they can give identities like you're a slave or you're a goddess or whatever the program is designed to produce in them. They can give those kinds of identities. There's always going to be two extremes in trauma and in the programming. You're going to have the helpless little one who's been victimized and they're carrying that pain. And then out of that, they're going to train somebody to rise up above it. And the one who rises up above is completely disassociated from the one that's in pain. And they don't even know they came from the same source. They can be attached to an entity that will keep them from feeling pain. It's offered as a friend or a rescuer or as a support. So the trauma gets the person in pain, intense pain, and then an entity is offered to pull them out of the pain and to help them rise above. And it takes a lot of layers of programming to get that kind of disconnection. So we're not talking about just a one-time event. It's multiple layers of it. But it sets up emotionally conflicting situations that convince the child that this up here is what they want. So the programmer will create situations on purpose that get the child to choose rising above it, connecting to an entity and being able to rise above it. So they set up situations. It's not always the brain shutting down in trauma. Sometimes it's just a situation that's a setup. Like a little kid is locked in a room and they're told the key to get out of the room is inside this piece of meat. And they're told it's a dead body. When really, in reality, it's probably a piece of an animal or something. But because they're told it's a body, and they have to cut it out. Actually, sometimes they're told it's a live body, and little kids don't even have the logic to say, well, if it was alive, it would look like a human and it would be talking. So they're told, okay, the key to get out of this room is inside this, but you have to take a knife and get the key out. So they feel like they're actually killing somebody in order to escape. And they feel like they're making all these terrible choices and they feel like they're so bad, when really it's just like a fish. It's not even a person, and they don't even have the understanding of what they're doing, but they're being told something and they're believing it because they're so young. They don't have the filter. That's a prime time for them to program, because there's trauma in being trapped. There's trauma in having to choose to rescue themselves over harming something. There's trauma in being told it's a person. There's trauma in having to make really tough decisions and thinking that you'll die if you don't. So it's layered trauma for this little child. And when they get out, then they have this sense of guilt, like, I killed somebody so that I could live. And then they swoop in and they say, you know what, you really need help connecting. You need help making decisions. And we have this spirit who will be your guide, who will help you make decisions. Because that was really hard. And some of those decisions were tough on you. So we can give you this help. And that's how they put the spirit in charge of telling that child what to do. And so all their life, that spirit will be with them until they disconnect from it. Okay. A programmer wants to create a whole section in a system. So they have like whole worlds or universes, or when they want to create a certain belief system, they can have a whole section that they're trying to create. And so they'll repeat a trauma multiple times, time after time after time, because it'll split the child purposefully and make a lot of parts, and then they can assign roles to those parts to carry out the program. They can show pictures of the jobs that each part is supposed to have, and they can have stories and movies, especially popular movies that have like a timeless appeal, because the programmer's trying to build this internal world, and it can have sections that mirror their actual life. Like it could have a church, it could have a school, it could have a mall. They could have a room inside that is set up like they speak it into existence in their mind, that there's a room just like this programming room, and it's in there. And so then they'll set up internal parts of themselves to run a programming center, where at night when the person's sleeping, the programmers, which are actually parts of them, are bringing other parts to this room, and the person is suffering incredibly in their sleep, and they wake up feeling terrible, and they don't even know why. They don't know why when they sleep things just start to fall apart, and they wake up feeling like they got run over by a truck. Well, that can be internal programming that's happening at night. So whatever the programmer wants to set up inside, he basically can dream up whatever is going to keep this child programmed. Disney movies are ideal for this because they seem to be passed down through the generations, and they're seen as harmless when actually they're drawing the children into a world of witchcraft, and they make it really appealing by showing them there's a good version of witchcraft and the bad version, but in reality it all comes from the kingdom of darkness. There's no distinction between white and black magic. They both come from satanic sources. The white witchcraft is presented as harmless love spells, or there's some kind of financial benefit. But black magic is presented as something used for seeking revenge and domination, when all of it is sourced from the kingdom of darkness. But the programmer will use roles within the movie to say, oh, you're the good fairy, or you're Cinderella, or whatever, to tell the child who they are. So they may have reoccurring dreams throughout their life that give some information about what they've gone through, but they think they're dreaming about the movie, or they think they're having a dream because they have a fever. They're having a reoccurring dream about a fever, when actually they're dreaming about things that they've experienced. They just don't know it. The child would be taught the characters and the roles of the person in the movie, and taught the powers of witchcraft, and it feels helpful. There's a lot of programming like that that's done in the area of the soul. So soul fragments are set up to dominate one another. They can, like I said, be trained to believe that they're like a programmer, but they can also be trained to be like they're their parents. And so they'll have a mom and a dad set up on the inside, and those parts keep things in line. They keep things in order, and they can even be like nurturing at times. It depends on the situation. So you can have several mom parts, or several dad parts, or programmer parts, or pastor parts. Whatever their life is like, they're going to try and take that from the outside and set it up internally in their brain. Generational programming is a little bit different, because generational programming is done by reaching that core of the person, where the soul and the spirit of the child connects to the spirit of God. And that's been called the neshama. The neshama is a word, it's a Hebrew word, and that word is used in scripture. And it's the breath of God, where the breath of God meets your spirit and has you come alive. So where your soul and your spirit connect, in that place where God connects, that's where they're going to try and split some of the core off for generational programming. And that usually involves like a death experience. Infinity programming is a type of programming that's particularly strong, and that's put in that spirit level. So not only do you have the soul fragments that are carrying out the stories, like the fairy tales and little kids stories. It can be even cartoons. You have that in the soul, but then you also have the generational programming that's put in the spirit, and those are death experiences typically. And they're told they can never be free. And it feels very solid. It feels like there's no resolution to that. because it's kind of the process like this. Like if you chained a baby elephant when they were little and they could not break free from that chain, as a full-grown elephant, if you put that same chain on them, they'll think they can't break free even though they have the ability to completely break free. So if you start young enough and train them that freedom isn't possible, they believe it and they carry it. And it's even amplified in people because of trauma. You start young and they believe that they can't break free, but then you also have that traumatic barrier where they don't even know what happened to them. So they can't logic it out. And so when you're working with the person and they're bringing up these memories, sometimes just talking it through with their adult self helps them see the holes in the story and helps them go, wow, okay, both of those things can't be true, or that couldn't have been this, because of this. So when you bring logic into that situation, then you're able to tear down some of the stronghold that's been built. And sometimes it's just Jesus has to come in and say, I came so that you can be set free. He's got a million ways to break this programming. He can bring truth into it. He can bring out his sword and cut the infinity symbol. And he can be so creative that it's shocking. He'll say things like, eternity is more powerful than infinity. And I'm the eternal God. I'm the first and the last. I created you. I sustained you. I preserved you. I called you. I bought you with a price. You're mine and you are never theirs. So when he says words like that to overcome the programming, the truth will set them free. And you might come back around to that kind of programming, and you might have to say, okay, we've dealt with this kind of programming before, and Jesus has some more to tell you. And so don't be discouraged if you deal with something and then it comes back around again, because within the certain areas of programming, there are a lot of layers. This isn't just a one-time fix it. This is, you grow, you get a little bit of truth, Jesus speaks into that, and you take that truth to the next area where you need truth. So you're bringing that truth, but you're getting more. And then you're taking that compounded truth to the next area where you need truth. And you might need to be the one reminding the person of what Jesus has said before and of the truth that he's given. They may not have access to that because of the dissociation. They might not have access to what Jesus said before. And so you've got to help them remember and help them go, okay, he said this. Now let's connect to him here and let's go to the next place where we need that truth. So you're going to be working with areas of the soul. You're going to be working with areas of the spirit. The most healing that will happen, the strongest healing that happens is when you work from the area of the spirit and you're able to bring that out to the soul, because the spirit of the person knows everything that has ever happened to them. The spirit is there, even though it's not quickened and renewed yet. The spirit is there at conception. It comes into a fallen state, but it's there. And so the whole time that fetus is developing, the spirit is there. And the spirit knows everything that has happened. And so as you're strengthening the soul of that person and the identity of that person to be able to handle what the spirit knows, the more you can get to that spirit level and work with them from that level, that's when you're going to see the deepest kind of healing. Because it does help. It does. Every little bit of truth they get in their soul really helps them, really builds identity. And you may not be able to get to the spirit right away. I know there's a lot of people that like to try and work with the spirit immediately, but it takes a lot of courage for somebody to hear things like this. And it takes a lot of courage for them to be willing that anything ever happened to them. So by the time they're in the chair in front of you asking for help, they are displaying such bravery to know that they need the help, to know that they aren't able to fix this on their own, and that there may be things here that they don't understand. that takes a lot of courage. So we want to honor that. And so we've got to meet them where they are. And so if you're asking questions to try and understand and they don't know the answer, you're working with the soul. And that's okay. Work with the soul. Because what you're doing is building relationship with that person so that they can tolerate the exposure when the spirit comes forward, when the core of that person comes forward and starts taking ownership of this is their life. So you want to be working gently and at the pace of the person who's in front of you. But just know if there's a lot of dissociation, if they can't remember from one session to the next, if they are answering questions with I don't know or I can't remember, those kind of things are letting you know they don't feel safe yet. And that's not anything to do with you. It's necessarily, I mean, it could be, but it doesn't have to be anything to do with what you're doing. It could be where they're at emotionally. And so they're trying to just gradually reconcile what their life is. They thought it was this, but it included this. And so they're trying to bring the two sides of their world together, and they have to do that as slowly as possible. So there is no set time limit. It's whatever they can tolerate. So you want them to be able to live in the both and. So I've had great experiences with Jesus, and I've had terrible trauma. Both of those are true. What does that mean? So reconciling that both are true can take a while, and it's okay for it to take a while. And it's okay if the person isn't able to tolerate where they need to go. You just stay encouraging and just letting them know, hey, where you're at is okay. It's okay that you're feeling what you're feeling. It doesn't feel okay. It feels terrible, but it is okay for you to be where you are right now. Every person's different. Every story hits different. It's okay for you to take as much time as you need. So sometimes what I like to tell them is hold the new information loosely. You can keep it as far away from yourself as you need to. You don't even have to acknowledge that this is yours yet. You can say a part of me experienced this, and you can keep it out here for a while. It's going to be important eventually to bring that in closer, but sometimes that takes some time, and everybody's different. They'll start integrating it as their story the more comfortable they are with Jesus and the more identity that they get from him. Then they're going to be able to hold this and understand, oh, this doesn't define me. This isn't my identity. This is just a circumstance that happened to me, but God has been with me the entire time. And even when I didn't know that I was calling out to him, even when I didn't know that I was leaning on him, I was. And even when I didn't know that he was there helping me, he was. There's nothing that can separate me from his love. Not any circumstance, not any human, not any spirit. So they'll get to the point where they can hold their story and call it their own eventually. You want to try and just build them up and honor the process with them, honor the courage it took to get them in that chair and to even start to think that they could face any of this, because it's deeper than they know, and that's okay. You work with what you know, you honor what's there, you build them up, you encourage them, you build their relationship with Jesus, you encourage them and show them all the ways that they're functioning despite this being true. And you remind them of the truth, remind them of their Savior. You stay with them, you're there with them. Whatever emotion they have is okay, even if it's anger. You just stay there and you're constant and you're steady and you're mirroring Christ. Because the more they're connecting to Christ in you, the more they're going to be able to connect to Christ on their own. All right, there we go.